Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Vietnam Combat, Firefights and Writing History by Robin Bartlett, narrated by Chris Monteiro. The Trail. The trail is only a meter wide and weaves its way through thick green and brown underbrush, so overgrown that even a jackrabbit would have trouble threading its way. Large, thorny limbs form a matted barrier as you strain, push, shove, and bleed to get through. Wait-a-minute vines seem to take special pleasure in tripping you, spraining your ankle, causing you to swear. With each conquering, a new thicket presents itself, as though to say, "You made it through that one, now try me." As the trail wears on, your sore muscles, aching feet, and back cry out for relief from a 60-pound pack filled with sea rations, ammunition, canteens, and combat equipment. 10-minute breaks ease the pain for a short while, and then you're numb again. Rest is a beautiful dream. You must conserve water, so you sip sweet mouthfuls, allowing it to run slowly down your cotton-dry throat. If you stop sweating, the dirt cakes on your arms and face, and you can't spare the water to wash it off. It's time to push on, waddling like a pregnant woman. The trail is a struggle between mind and body. The two fight every step, clawing a trough, your brain forcing you on. Your mind is filled with thoughts, home, cool beer, women, but ever alert for any noise, any false movement, anything out of the ordinary along the trail. There are so many things to remember. Keep alert, stay alive. You must kill him first, you must pull the trigger first, and you must be fast. But the trail pulls you down. Eyes droop, sweat drips into them, the salt burning and stinging. Dirty hands rub the tears away, and nails, bitten to the quick, scratch the mosquito bites from the night before. Alert, alert. Keep your head up. Breathe deep. Don't think about home. Don't think about anything except staying alive. Forget the pain, the aching muscles, the tired feet. Clear your mind. Protect your life. Don't let the trail win. The perspiration runs in big, dirty drops off the stock of your M16 rifle. Your hands push the thorns aside. You work your body through, but your pack catches. You pull. Thorns cut across your shoulders. Damn. But keep following that little green trail. Keep pushing, feet obeying a harsh command. But listen, stay alert. The jungle is quiet, and only an occasional monkey screams out, making you jump and duck. You follow the trail by feel, toes pointing forward, searching for vines and roots. Your eyes scan to the front, searching for movement. Ears strain like radar, listening for the click of a safety being released. Their weapons sound like popcorn exploding. Listen for popcorn. Your knees are bent, limp, ready to drop face flat in a split second as you walk the trail. The trail is life. Pain, frustration, wishes, agony, and death. You get to know it well, and you learn quickly what life means and how precious it is and how much you took it for granted before. The trail changes many lives. It ends some, too. Robin Bartlett, Army Digest, April 1969. The Trail by Robin Bartlett. Preface. Dragging Chains. The edges of the wounds we bear get softer, but they never go away. They never heal. I don't think there's ever a resolution. As early as 1678, Swiss military physicians used the term nostalgia to define a condition characterized by insomnia, anxiety, cardiac palpitations, stupor, and melancholy. At the time, German doctors called these symptoms Heimweh, or homesickness, while Spanish physicians called the condition estar roto, or to be broken. French doctors named it maladie du pays, disease of the country. During the American Civil War, The condition was soldier's heart, or irritable heart. The malaise was marked by a rapid pulse, anxiety, and trouble breathing. Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage provides an excellent portrayal of the problem experienced by a Union Army recruit facing bombardment. In 1905, Russia coined the term boy shock, or battle shock. In 1919, at the end of World War I, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first observance of Armistice Day, now known as Veterans Day. During World War I, some soldiers were reported to have experienced shell shock, a term established by British psychologist Charles Myers. The term was used to describe a reaction to the explosion of artillery shells. Common symptoms included panic and sleeplessness. War neuroses was a term used by military psychiatrists during World War I and II to describe the nervous and mental disorders soldiers experienced from intense wartime environments. World War II saw the name change again, this time to combat stress reaction. This was yet another name given to describe the adverse effects resulting from battle stress. Typical symptoms include exhaustion, decrease in responsiveness, uncertainty, feeling disconnected, and an inability to focus. Almost half of World War II military discharges were said to be the result of combat exhaustion. This symptom was made famous by General George Patton, who, among others, believed such men were cowards. He was severely criticized for striking a man in a hospital unit suffering from the condition. In 1952, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, made its first appearance in the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, APA's DSM-1. The term used was gross stress reaction. That term was dropped in the second edition of the book, but in 1980, PTSD came back into the vernacular. The entry was in direct response to research involving returning Vietnam War veterans as well as Holocaust survivors and other trauma sufferers, such as police officers who had killed suspects or had been shot, and women who had been attacked, sexually assaulted, or beaten. In 1989, the Veterans Administration created the National Center for PTSD. Between 1989 and 2013, the center reported treating more than 500,000 veterans diagnosed with PTSD. According to a March 2023 National Vietnam Veterans Readjustment Study, about 15% of Vietnam veterans are currently diagnosed with PTSD. My own experience with PTSD is discussed in Chapter 12, Saturation Ambushing. The fact that I was raised in a military family familiar with the effects of PTSD may have helped with my adjustment upon return to the world. I also remained in the service for several years and continued to live in a military community, within a band of brothers that acknowledged the condition. But the traumatic experiences that I endured should have been acknowledged and brought to light. They were not. For many years, I simply locked all those events up in the titanium trunk located in the back of my mind, until, one day, they started to leak out. Then I sought and received help from a psychiatrist friend. Writing this book, too, is an effort for me to come to grips with events from 50-plus years ago. I certainly have profited from my military training and experiences. That training made me fearless about facing challenges. But the training has also been a challenge in my civilian career. I frequently thought I knew more and had more life experience than the people who were my managers. Relearning lessons of sympathy, empathy, courtesy, compassion, love, and peace have not always come easy. I thank my wife for frequently kicking me in the butt to remind me. There is a line from Charles Dickens's famous story, A Christmas Carol, that has always resonated with me. These words describe how I have often felt over the past 50 years. "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it." We all wear the chains of life we forge day to day. We also tend to relive and remember our negative experiences more frequently than the positive ones. Perhaps that is to remind us not to repeat our mistakes. And while my experiences occurred over 50 years ago, those events are as fresh and as real in my mind today as the day they occurred. There is rarely a day that goes by that I don't recall some event that happened to me during those 365 days. I am sure they will be with me for the rest of my life. They are the chains I drag behind me. Many people feel that the Vietnam War is a black stain on American history because it is the first war that we lost. While I personally find the Vietnam War Memorial to be a wonderful tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice, its color and design reinforce our country's loss of the war. Even though I did not experience the negativism and discourtesy that many Vietnam vets did upon return to the U.S., that negative attitude became so apparent as the war wound down. It became clear that the American people wanted to put this war out of mind and memory, and behind them, as quickly as possible. This frequently meant ignoring the veterans who served there and lost the war as well. I am so pleased to see that attitude has dramatically changed for our vets currently returning from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. We have welcomed these vets home in airports, in parades, in society, in memorial services, and in hospitals. It's a shame that Vietnam vets did not receive something similar. In fact, many met quite the opposite response after stepping back into the civilian world, furthering the common embarrassed and negative feelings so many of my brothers have about the war. But we Vietnam vets are a tough breed, now in our late 60s and 70s. We plan to be here for a while longer, but many of us are still suffering from PTSD, homelessness, horrific memories, and stories that need to be told. The edges of the wounds we bear get softer, but they never go away. They never heal. For many, there's never a resolution. Ironically, even though he never served in the armed forces, one of the most famous quotes attributed to John Wayne is, "Courage is being scared to death but saddling up anyway." I think this sums up how so many of us feel about our Vietnam experience. I hope you will take time to ask your Vietnam vet to tell you his or her story. Listen and ask questions. Many still need to unburden themselves. We only wish to be recognized and to share our own stories from the trail. We need someone to care. We need your empathy. Above all, please, always use the code words, "Welcome home," rather than "Thank you for your service" when you speak with a Vietnam vet. These words are so meaningful to us. They will bring tears to our eyes and lumps to our throats. Introduction. As I walked down the path leading to the apex of the chevron-shaped marble walls, I noticed several things. It gets darker, it gets cooler, it gets quieter. The year 1968 was the most significant in the history of the Vietnam War. It certainly was the most significant year in my life. The war was at its height. There were more American troops in country and more American and enemy casualties, both wounded in action, WIA, and killed in action, KIA, than in any other year. The panel for 1968 of the Vietnam Veterans War Memorial has more names on it than any other. It was also the year when the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army attempted to reassert themselves in the hearts and minds of the South Vietnamese people. For the first time, these enemies launched a large-scale coordinated attack on major cities in the South. The Tet Offensive of January 31, 1968, and many Tet Offensives that followed in May and August of that year initially caught American troops by surprise. The offensives and significant losses of lives caused Americans at home to doubt President Johnson's administration's claims that we were winning the war. According to Dr. Eric Villard, military historian at the U.S. Army Center for Military History, the Tet Offensive was one of the most significant military, political, and social events of the second half of the 20th century. It was the largest enemy offensive launched by North Vietnam, and is generally interpreted as the turning point in American public opinion, from believing that American and South Vietnamese soldiers were winning to recognizing we were in a stalemate. In a surprise series of attacks focused on 300 cities, the NVA achieved initial success partly because of lack of preparation and partly because more than 50% of the ARVN troops were away from their units celebrating the holiday. While the NVA succeeded in penetrating major cities like Saigon, Hue, and Quang Tri, the overall engagement was considered a military failure, with the loss of as many as 40,000 ground troops out of a total of 120,000. The U.S. suffered more Americans killed on January 31st than on any other day of the war, with a total of 216 killed and 1,609 wounded. An additional 421 ARVN troops were killed, 2,123 wounded, and 31 missing. The offensive, however, became a stunning propaganda victory for North Vietnam. It not only served to begin to change American public opinion, but also placed a strain on relations between the governments of South Vietnam and the United States. The battle, watched nightly on color TVs, also planted the seeds of doubt in American political and military leaders. Soon, war protests in American streets rose to new heights. Americans were tired of war and tired of losing their sons to questionable objectives. Patience and support for the war began to waver. Each night, the evening news paraded the names and photographs of American soldiers who died that day. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, was a war correspondent who spent significant amounts of time embedded with American troops during the Battle of Hue. His announcement on February 27th and the dramatic daily television coverage of the war are widely interpreted as a turning point in American support. Cronkite stated, "It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate." Don Oberdorfer, professor at Johns Hopkins University, in his book Tet, The Turning Point, states that Tet was the first true-life big event in which television played a catalytic role in changing people's thinking and behavior on matters of national and international policy. The nation gradually became polarized, with protests, marches, draft card, and flag burning pervading city streets and college campuses. It was a year of tremendous dissent and unrest, further traumatized with the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. Furthermore, there was an awakening among senior and junior American officers and non-commissioned officers that our civilian leaders had shamelessly lied to us about the purpose and objectives of the war. American troops stationed in Vietnam in 1968 also knew this was a war we could not win. Yes, we could always out-bomb, out-shoot, and out-kill more of them than they could of us. Whenever we could locate, block, and hold a massed enemy force in a specific area, we could always bring superior firepower to bear. But the enemy was adept at dispersing, breaking into small groups, evading, and finding their way back across the border into safe havens in Laos and Cambodia, where American troops were not permitted to follow. Among many American soldiers and junior officers stationed in Vietnam, the desire to win was waning, replaced by a philosophy of self-protection. The common goal was serve my 365 and return home in one piece. Other events that colored American opinion were the shocking televised execution of a captured and handcuffed VC prisoner by a South Vietnamese General Nguyen Ngoc Loan, chief of the National Police, in February 1968. The video of this execution exposed the brutality of the war and the callous way in which Viet Cong VC prisoners were commonly treated. Later, in November 1969, the events of the My Lai massacre under the leadership of Lieutenant William Calley came to light. The officer ordered his soldiers to kill innocent men, women, children, and animals of a village without cause. A total massacre of the village was narrowly avoided by the quick action taken by a helicopter pilot who witnessed what was happening and ordered the platoon to stand down. This public event amplified the negativism directed toward returning American soldiers and soured the American public's opinion of our military. Soldiers returning home refused to wear their uniforms in public for fear of being spit upon or called baby killers. The 12 months I spent in Vietnam were the most challenging and difficult of my life. As a 22-year-old second lieutenant, I had recently completed the infantry officer basic course, airborne, and ranger training at Fort Benning, Georgia. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and knew I would receive orders for Vietnam within the next 6 to 9 months. Imbued with this training and skills, my demeanor was one of blustery self-confidence. I had gone through the best training the Army had to offer. I was in the best physical condition of my life, and I had been trained to lead a platoon in combat and overcome any enemy obstacle that confronted me. I walked tall and proudly in my spit-shined jump boots with airborne wings and ranger tab on my uniform and paratrooper emblem on my hat. Soldiers in my unit saluted me and said, "Airborne, sir," and I responded, "All the way." But silently, I felt deeply conflicted. Within a few months of completing training and a brief assignment with the 82nd, I found myself on an airplane bound for Tan Son Nhut Air Base near Saigon, on orders to join the 101st Airborne Division. My attitude, and the attitude of many of the other officers and men I led, had begun to change. The philosophy was keep your head and butt down and don't take chances with your men. The belief that Vietnam was a lost cause had begun to creep into our minds and was reinforced by protests where the common cry was, "Hell no, we won't go." A soldier headed for Vietnam only had to endure for 365 days of field duty, and officers were required to spend only 6 months before transferring to a staff position. Yet the rumors persisted that platoon leaders had a survival rate of less than 90 days in country. Upon arrival, we all received a short-timer calendar. It was the most valuable piece of paper every soldier carried. The image on the paper was that of a nude female body partitioned into 365 units, and each day I religiously colored in another section, tracking the days until I could return to the world. The years 1968 and 9 were to be the worst times to be a combat infantry platoon leader in that God-forsaken land, let alone a combat rifleman. Officers and soldiers alike commonly recognized those years as transitional. I saw the combat tactics of my unit change from aggressive, find the enemy, attack and kill him, to locate the enemy, pull back, and blow them away with superior firepower. Unnecessary risk-taking by leaders was met with grave concern by frontline soldiers. As a platoon leader, I quickly learned that I commanded respect and support from my men by not taking unnecessary risks and by using reconnaissance by artillery fire before entering any danger zone. Gradually, I and many of my fellow junior officers came to realize that the strategy of not allowing American troops to pursue enemy units into Cambodia, Laos, and even North Vietnam was a prescription for failure. Despite this realization, the war persisted for another 4 years because no president wanted the stigma of being the first to lose an American war. Writing this book has also been a cathartic and healing experience for me. It was challenging to recall these stories and retell them to the best of my memory and writing ability. Some are humorous. Some are horrific. As I wrote, I was amazed at how many details my mind retained. At times, the writing transported me back to a day and time more than 50 years ago, and I relived the incident as vividly as it occurred. I saw the colors. I felt the fear. There was sweat on my face and underarms. I even recalled the smells. Many of these stories have been difficult to remember and write. Writing made me relive the events and actions I locked away at the back of my mind for so many years. I never wanted to relive them, but in time I learned I needed to heal from the experience. Killing enemy soldiers was the most frightening experience I ever had. Most kills were at a distance, which made it a bit easier to cope with, but often the enemy was blown away at close range with claymore mines, machine gun, and M16 fire. The enemy rarely survived, and the bodies were always badly mutilated. After an ambush, it became necessary to search the bodies for documents. It was not a task for the faint of heart, and many of my men just could not bring themselves to do it. Thus, the job often fell to me and my platoon sergeant to search the pockets, helmets, and packs of the dead enemy soldiers. At first, I was repulsed, but in time, I simply packed my emotions away in the back of my mind and did what needed to be done. Usually, there was little of value to be found. Much harder was the handling of KIAs from my platoon. This involved wrapping them in ponchos, filling out death cards, entering the coordinates where they died, signing my name, and tying the card to their boot. This was always a traumatic experience and never to be forgotten. These events changed me. They made me a different person. I became unemotional and cold-hearted. I compartmentalized all emotion and feelings. I refused to allow the experiences to affect me. I lost aspects of my personality during my months in combat. Love, empathy, caring, and patience, to mention just a few. I have spent a good deal of time over the past 50-plus years dragging the chains of Vietnam behind me and trying to recapture the person I once was, before Vietnam. It has not been an easy road, but with the love and support of an amazing wife, 3 marvelous sons, and close friends who have stayed with me through the years, I have made progress. Remembering, writing, and sharing my stories from the trail is part of my healing experience, as well as my continuing attempt to understand and cope with the impact 1968 and 9 had on my life. As many of my Vietnam veteran brothers know, the experience has changed us all indelibly. The war each of us experienced was colored by the terrain we humped, the amount of time we spent in the boonies, and the engagements we fought. All veterans have a different story to tell. This one is mine. The Vietnam War Memorial has great meaning for me, and I have visited it many times. It's always a cathartic experience. As I walk down the path leading to the apex of the chevron-shaped marble walls, I notice several things. It gets darker, it gets cooler, it gets quieter. The experience always reminds me of the foxholes I dug and huddled in at night. It brings back memories of the 7 months I spent as a platoon leader, the night ambushes, firefights, and the instant fear I experienced from hearing sounds of movement. Many of the names of the men I led are inscribed on the wall. I do not remember all their names because we called each other by nicknames and call signs, but I always spend a few minutes visiting and touching the names I do recall. As I walk down the path leading to the memorial, the memories and events often come flooding back. At first, that experience was exceedingly difficult for me to handle, but now, with time, I come away feeling better. It truly is the wall that heals. Author's note: while proofing and rewriting this manuscript, I remembered the 100-plus letters I wrote home during my year in Vietnam that my mother had carefully saved. I think she had a premonition I might someday try to write this book. I had also sent a few letters to a college classmate who thoughtfully saved and returned them to me. I dusted the letters off, put them in chronological order, and started reading what I wrote over 50 years ago. I've included snippets from these letters in appropriate chapters in an effort to add more of my personal feelings at the time and provide insight into the juxtaposition between what actually happened and what I wrote home about. I took many of the photographs in this book. Others were
Sample complete. Ready to continue?